Story 1. The Whispering Woods. Lena always loved hiking. Growing up in the Appalachian Mountains, she had explored more trails than she could count. But there was one place she had always avoided, the Whispering Woods. It was the kind of place locals talked about in hushed tones, the kind of forest that had a bad reputation, though no one could really explain why. On a late October day, as the sun began to set behind the mountains, Lena decided it was time to face her irrational fears. Armed with a flashlight, a map, and a warm jacket, she set off into the Whispering Woods. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches forming a canopy that blocked out the fading light. The deeper she ventured, the quieter the world became. No birds, no rustling leaves, just silence. After an hour of walking, Lena realized the path had all but disappeared beneath her feet. Panic gripped her chest. She checked her watch and saw it was nearly 8 p.m. Night was closing in fast. As Lena turned back, hoping to retrace her steps, she noticed something unsettling. The trees seemed different, their gnarled branches twisted in unfamiliar ways. Her path, once clear, had become a tangled mess of undergrowth. She was lost. She tried to calm herself, taking out her map and flashlight, but no matter how hard she studied it, nothing made sense. The landmarks were gone, the trails distorted. The once clear path had become a confusing maze. As the temperature dropped, a cold sweat formed on her skin. Then, she heard it. A faint whisper. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the sound grew clearer. It wasn't just a sound. It was words. Lena's blood turned to ice as she realized the whispers were calling her name. Lena! Lena! Heart pounding, she swung her flashlight around, searching for the source of the sound. But there was nothing, just trees. A surge of terror shot through her, but she forced herself to move forward, convinced that the voices were just her imagination. That was when she saw something that stopped her in her tracks, a figure standing just beyond the reach of her light. Its silhouette was barely visible, but it was there, motionless, watching her. The whispers grew louder. Lena, come closer. She backed away, her breath quickening. The figure remained still, but the whispers seemed to come from all around her now. She had no choice but to run. Heart hammering in her chest, Lena turned and sprinted back the way she had come. She no longer cared about the map or the trail. She just wanted to escape the haunting voices that surrounded her. But no matter how fast she ran, the whispers followed her. Lena, you can't leave. She stumbled through the woods, her flashlight flickering, her legs growing weaker with every step. Just when she thought she could run no more, she saw it, a faint light through the trees. Hope surged within her. She pushed herself forward, breaking through the underbrush, and stumbled out of the forest onto the trailhead where her car was parked. The whispers stopped. Lena collapsed into the driver's seat, breathing heavily. She didn't look back as she sped away, vowing never to return to the Whispering Woods. But as she drove, she couldn't shake the feeling that something from the forest had followed her. And every night after, just as she drifted to sleep, she would hear it again, faint but unmistakable. Her name, whispered from the shadows. Story 2. The Forgotten Road. Jake and his friends were driving home after a camping trip when they took a wrong turn. The sun had already set, and the GPS wasn't working. The road they found themselves on was narrow, winding through thick woods that seemed to go on forever. Jake swore he had never seen this road before, despite growing up in the area. It'll loop back to the main highway eventually, his friend Matt said, though his voice betrayed his unease. They drove in silence for what felt like hours, the road never ending, the trees closing in on either side. The headlights cut through the darkness, but beyond their reach was only a suffocating black void. After a while, Jake's anxiety turned to dread. Something wasn't right. Suddenly they passed an old, decrepit gas station. Its lights were off and the windows were shattered, but it stood out like a beacon in the darkness. Jake slowed the car. Maybe we should ask for directions, his girlfriend Sarah suggested. Matt shook his head. That place looks abandoned. No one's there. Jake felt an irrational compulsion to stop. Despite the eerie feeling in his gut, He pulled into the gas station's parking lot. They all got out, hesitantly approaching the building. As they neared the entrance, the wind picked up, howling through the broken windows. Inside, it was pitch black. Jake shined his phone's flashlight around, illuminating dust-covered shelves and rusting gas pumps. The place had clearly been deserted for years. "Let's get out of here," Sarah whispered. But just as Jake turned to leave, he saw something strange on the floor. Footprints, fresh ones, leading deeper into the store. "Guys, look at this." They all froze, staring at the tracks. The tension was palpable. Without speaking, they followed the footprints, their breath shallow with fear. The tracks led them to a door in the back of the store, slightly ajar. Behind it was a staircase descending into darkness. "I'm not going down there," Sarah said, her voice trembling. Neither was Jake. But Matt, ever the skeptic, scoffed. "It's probably just some vagrants or animals. I'll check it out." Before they could stop him, Matt flicked on his flashlight and disappeared down the stairs. Jake and Sarah stood in tense silence, waiting for him to return. Minutes passed. Nothing. "Matt," Jake called. No response. Suddenly they heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from the basement. It was followed by the sound of something moving quickly toward them, like feet dragging across the floor. Jake grabbed Sarah's hand and bolted out of the store, the two of them sprinting to the car. As they slammed the doors shut, Jake fumbled for the keys. The growling had grown louder, closer. He finally got the engine started and peeled out of the parking lot, not looking back. Matt was never seen again. The police searched the area, but no one could find the gas station Jake and Sarah had described. It was as if the place had vanished along with their friend. To this day, Jake avoids that road, but he can never shake the feeling that whatever was down in that basement is still waiting for someone else to find it. Story 3. The Shadow of the Lake. Emily had been driving for hours, her destination a remote cabin on the edge of Lake Isolde. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend getaway, but as night fell, she realized she had missed a crucial turn. The road she found herself on was desolate, running parallel to the lake but offering no indication of where it would lead. Frustrated, she pulled over to check her phone's GPS. No signal. She sighed, staring out at the lake's inky black surface. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting long shadows on the shore. In the distance, she noticed something unusual, a single light flickering on the lake's edge. Thinking it might be another cabin, she decided to investigate. Emily grabbed her flashlight and ventured toward the light, her footsteps crunching on the gravel. As she drew closer, she saw that the light wasn't coming from a cabin. It was a lantern, hanging from a low branch of a tree. Beneath the tree stood an old woman, her back to Emily, staring out at the lake. "Excuse me?" Emily called, hoping the woman could give her directions. The old woman didn't move. Emily's stomach twisted with unease. She stepped closer, her flashlight beam catching the edge of the woman's tattered dress. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Slowly the woman turned. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and vacant. But what terrified Emily most was the way her skin seemed almost translucent, as if the woman were made of mist. Before Emily could react, the old woman pointed a bony finger at the lake. "It's waiting for you," she whispered in a raspy voice. Emily froze. The lantern flickered and went out, plunging them both into darkness. Panic surged through her. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, she could hear the woman's voice growing louder, echoing across the water. "It's waiting. It's waiting." She reached her car, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life, and Emily sped down the road, not daring to look back. But as she drove, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the old woman standing on the shore, her figure growing smaller and smaller until she was swallowed by the shadows of the night. Emily never made it to the cabin. The next morning, she found herself back on the main highway, her memory of the night fragmented and confusing. But one thing was clear. She would never return to Lake Isolde, where something ancient and unseen lurked beneath the water, waiting for its next victim.